Which flagship camera takes the best night photos? There were some surprising differences that I discovered that I want to share with you. From photos and videos to portrait shots, zoom, and even time lapses, there's going to be something here for everyone. And I'm going to score them from 1 to 4 points as we go because there's 4 phones, but pay attention to the shots that you usually capture. It's like pause the video, note down your own scores because these are all, of course, very subjective. Now I'm also going to have all of these source images and videos linked down below this video so you can download and really pixel peep for yourself, along with some extra photos that didn't quite make it into this video just because it would have been too long. And feel free to comment down below if you disagree with the scores, just be nice down there. Now, first up, we have these shots taken using the main camera on each phone. All of these were shot at the highest possible settings, but without going into pro or raw modes, as I just want to compare what comes straight out of the camera. This image had lots of colors and light from all directions. The only bad shot from the 4 here was actually the Pixel 8 Pro, which totally missed the focus on me, even though the colors were the most accurate in this shot. So 1 point for the Pixel 8 Pro. Now, the S23 Ultra went overboard with the processing and lost a lot of the detail, so just 2 points to the S23 Ultra. The Xiaomi, however, was actually the best overall in terms of the color balance and exposure, but if you do zoom in, it just isn't that sharp in focus. So 3 points to the Xiaomi. And to cover off something to those asking why we don't have the Xiaomi 13 Ultra, it's not actually available here. And so I decided to go with the best Xiaomi phone that is available globally. So the winner here goes to the iPhone 15 Pro Max with 4 points. Even though I'm not a fan of the added saturation, it's also crushed the darker areas and perhaps over sharpened in other areas. It has done the best job at keeping the subject in focus, which is kind of the point here when taking a photo of somebody. Now, next up is this building shot. None of them are necessarily bad shots here, but the Pixel wins for being the most color accurate and pulling out details out from the ground, so 4 points there. The iPhone, second with 3 points. The S23 Ultra, third, although it did try to expose the shop windows, which kind of would have been good if it didn't give this yellow glare that really doesn't look good. And then the Xiaomi comes in last place here. Colors are slightly too warm and it loses a lot of detail in some of the areas. Another building shot here looking in from the outside. This one is close. I really had to zoom in to look around in this image. The Pixel, I think, wins here. It keeps the detail. It's not too warm inside, so 4 points to the Pixel. The iPhone next, though it is too warm, but it has kept the detail, so points to the iPhone there. The S23 Ultra next, although it does lose some detail as you zoom in on the inside. And also there are some strange like green and purple color issues going on in the white chairs here. And the Xiaomi fourth, as there is just an overall lack of detail. Next, a shot of this beautiful cathedral here. The iPhone hands down wins with the detail and the light that it was able to pull out of this image. Just incredible work for the iPhone. Now next, it is very close to me, but I think the S23 Ultra comes next, as the Pixel 8 Pro loses a lot of the detail in the grass and some of the darker areas, but the Xiaomi loses a lot of detail across, well, the whole image, so just 1 point to the Xiaomi. Now this next one was probably the most challenging shot of all the shots in this video. Absolute pure darkness. I couldn't even see where the camera was, so I couldn't see where I'm looking, and it was struggling to focus because the camera, of course, couldn't see me either. So all the shots we took were also handheld in this video, so there's no like ideal or unrealistic scenario of capturing these perfect tripod shots when like nobody really carries around a tripod in their pockets. But surprises of all surprises, the Xiaomi 13T Pro actually comes out with the best shot here. It is the most detailed, the colors are the most accurate. It's actually really crazy how it manages to pull color out of, well, essentially nowhere. Like it's essentially a black hole here. So 4 points to the Xiaomi. Now the iPhone 15 Pro Max is next here with 3 points. I do like the background of the S23 Ultra's picture, but as far as me and the path that I'm standing on, it is still pretty bad. 2 points to the S23 Ultra. The Pixel just really struggled to do anything here, so just 1 point to the Pixel. But the main camera isn't the only camera that gets used. Often it's the ultra-wide camera, which typically performs really poorly in low light. So let's start with our next shot. Now the iPhone here is the darkest image of them all. I actually had this issue with quite a lot of the iPhone's photos where the night mode wouldn't kick in because it didn't think it was dark enough and therefore gave you an overall darker image. But it gets 2 points in this one because the Xiaomi loses an awful lot of detail on both me, and it's just very noisy in all areas. And I'm going to call a tie now between the Pixel 8 Pro and the S23 Ultra. The Ultra does lose a lot of the detail around my face and has really saturated colors, where the Pixel once again just struggles to nail the focus on my face. So 3 points to each of these phones here. Now next up, and again, you're going to see a trend with the iPhone in these photos where it just doesn't think it's dark enough again. So the iPhone, last place. It is way too dark in this image, but it is close between the next three. But I will say the S23 Ultra, whilst it didn't blow out the highlights like the others did, it does suffer from that weird kind of color fringing that we've seen in this shot before, which is very interesting. interesting. So 2 points to the S23 Ultra. The Pixel retained a little bit more detail. Again, it's interesting to see how each brand leans on their strengths. Like Pixel is more about the software processing, whereas Samsung is more about hardware. So I'm gonna go with 4 points to the Pixel here. And the Xiaomi did a good job, but there's some weird kind of color fringing. And of course, the image overall went a bit too warm. So 3 points for the Xiaomi. That one is probably the closest one out of this whole video, so your opinions may vary, but honestly, all of them were very, very good shots, apart from the iPhone. Ultra wide of a car park now with some yellow leading lines as well as some bright light sources. Now the iPhone nailed this shot. The focus, the colors, the lighting, contrast, detail, even the stars above as well. So absolutely 4 points well won to the iPhone there. Now, next one is close again, but it is the Pixel 8 Pro for the colors. And you can see quite a few of the stars in the shot too. So 3 points to the Pixel. The Xiaomi 13T Pro also didn't do a bad job. So 2 points to the Xiaomi, but surprisingly, the S23 Ultra just seemed to completely miss here. Like half of the image is just blurry. Maybe that's because my hand just moved, but again, you don't always have time to kind of get the shot and make sure that it should capture it. It should just be, you know, first time snap, you've got the shot and move on like all the other phones we did. Now, next up is some video. And if you use an iPhone, you might be thinking, haha, we've got you on this one. But actually, you'd be wrong. The Pixel 8 Pro, the S23 Ultra, the 13T, all beat the iPhone in some of these tests. Starting with a simple time-lapse. Now, I set this up in my back garden. I know it's not the prettiest time-lapse, but I wanted to challenge these phones with a combination of some bright lights. There's a washing line in the middle that's bright, kind of brightly lit, and then the dark sky to see how they handle the contrast in between all of this image. Now, the Xiaomi 13T comes out of the gate with a stunner, like great detail on the brightly lit sections, detail on the grass is great, and the sky is exposed nicely so you can see the stars and the clouds which are passing overhead. Really, really great job. So 4 points to the 13T Pro here. The iPhone comes a close second. Now, I've only docked points here because the detail of the trees isn't as good as the Xiaomi here. Again, like look at the original files and you'll be able to see the difference here. The S23 Ultra next, as the quality was good on what was lit, but otherwise the sky isn't really exposed all that well, so it's very, very difficult to see the stars passing. And then finally the Pixel, same again, but an even more like awful exposure. Given that most of the image here is dark, you thought it would have been able to do a better job at like brightening up the sky, but yeah, apparently not. Software, no, not this time. And at this point in the video, I certainly thought that the Pixel 8 Pro and really the S23 Ultra would be scoring way, way higher than they are right now. Thankfully, I do dual carry both an iPhone and an Android phone. Currently, that's the Pixel 8 Pro because I'm testing this out. So I kind of get the best of both worlds. The problem is though that if you're like me and use a Google Pixel phone, but you also prefer using a Mac, well, each time you need to sign into a website, you know, out comes the phone whilst you then read off the passwords and you type them in like one by one, which sucks and takes a very, very long time. As a tech reviewer that sets up multiple phones, I can definitely confirm this. Now, the solution to that problem is to download an app called Keeper, which is a cross-platform password manager that works on any device, Apple, Mac, Windows, like the whole thing. It would honestly get so frustrating to do what people keep telling me in the comments, to export and import my passwords from Apple's keychain to Chrome and then Google's ones to then Samsung's ones. Just do it once and be forever grateful. Now you can grab 50% off using the link down below, which means it costs barely more than $1 or a UK pound per month. And that, my friends, for me, is well worth the cost of never remembering a password like ever again. And the honest fact is that Keeper sponsoring this video is the reason I was able to afford to make this video, to buy all these phones. So please do check them out. Keeper, again, once again, a huge thank you for your support. Now, this was a tricky shot both to, well, physically capture and for all the cameras too. We had to prop all the 4 phones like up like this on the floor, so we, you know, excuse the wonkiness of some of these angles. They were all shot in 4K, 30 FPS. The Pixel is my favorite here. It exposed the whole image nicely whilst keeping a lot of the detail. Then I would say is the iPhone 15 Pro Max, then the Xiaomi 13T Pro, and then the S23 Ultra, which was just very noisy in, well, pretty much all of the areas. And next up, here is a shot of looking directly inside a restaurant from kind of a dark street. None of them actually did a bad job, other than the choice of exposure that each kind of phone made in their own kind of shooting decisions. Now, interestingly, in this video, I actually think the Pixel 8 Pro has done the best, but as Pixels tend to do sometimes, they oversaturated the image. Like, you've got the detail in the IV sign at the top, you can see the blinds, the contrast with the dark umbrella, and there's also very little noise in their image. So yeah, win goes to the Pixel 8 Pro here. Then I would say the S23 Ultra. It's done a very respectable job, even though it's a little bit too dark, but the lights aren't blown out like on the iPhone. And then like the iPhone next, so 2 points to the iPhone. And the Xiaomi is going to be last here for just being way too noisy, just blowing out all of the highlights in the shots. Next up, we've got shots of me walking towards the camera with a mixture of lighting going on here. The iPhone, honestly, it looks kind of like unfocused. It looks a little blurry. I actually prefer the Pixel and the Xiaomi here. Like, it just seems to nail the focus, nails the colors, though there are, of course, some noise on the Xiaomi's photos. So 4 points to the Pixel 8 Pro, 3 points to the Xiaomi 13T Pro. There's lots of pros in this video. Then I think it's going to have to be the S23 Ultra to the 2 points and just 1 point to the iPhone 15 Pro Max. Now, as someone who has used an iPhone since basically forever, I am actually stunned at how badly it's performing here. Like, especially the video tests, you kind of assume that video is iPhone, but apparently video is not iPhone anymore, especially since the Xiaomi 13T is like half the price. Crazy. Now, in this next shot, we tested some passing traffic. I want to see which cameras suffer from lens flare and those reflections you get with bright lights. Now, the Xiaomi 13T, once again, wins hands down here. You can make out the detail in the brickwork, the colors are good, but there is a bit of noise, which is understandable because it's so dark. But I would choose a little bit of noise over totally washing out the detail like you see in, honestly, all the other 3 clips here. Look, those buildings just look like they're painted solid, like brown, gray, white, and red, which they're not. It's actual brickwork on the side. Now, it is marginal, but the iPhone just comes in next place. I would then say the Pixel 8 then comes next, or Pixel 8 Pro rather, and the S23 has the white balance totally off. So unfortunately for this one, the S23 Ultra comes in last place. But saying that, as you can see here, the S23 Ultra suffers with way less lens flare than any of the other phones. It's still there, but it's not as noticeable like the iPhone. Honestly, the iPhone seems the worst, even though they have this new coating this year on the lenses, which should reduce this from happening. Obviously not. Now, the next shot had some challenging lighting again, along with a very dark sky. Now, the S23 Ultra, after saying that about the S23 Ultra, does the best job here, so 4 points here. The iPhone is also great, but suffers from the bright lights reflecting yet again the lens. Again, that cool new coating that Apple applies basically doesn't make the blindest bit of difference. Now, next, the Pixel is quite noisy, but then the Xiaomi just feels a bit jittery here. So I'm going to tie both of these at 2 points each this time. But we move on to the next test. And I don't know about you, but I tend to use the portrait mode on these cameras far, far more than any other mode. I just love the like creamy backgrounds it gets you when you do that. But how does it perform in low light? Now, here's the next one. I'm looking for good edge detection here. Obviously, hello James, by the way, my glamorous assistant. He has a YouTube channel where he plays like drums. Check him out. I'll link down below if you're into that. Now, the iPhone 15 Pro Max definitely comes in first place here. Absolutely spotless on the edge detection. And actually, the Xiaomi 13T Pro comes in second, though it's a little bit soft around the edges. The blacks aren't as crushed as they are in the 23 Ultra, 2 points. And then the Pixel 8 Pro, honestly, last place. The edge detection is really like shockingly bad here. I mean, really? Up next, a really challenging lighting situation here. Bright lights behind me. There's not much light actually on me. And as you can see, we have some very interesting reflections going on with these lights behind me. But it is clear here that the S23 Ultra is the absolute winner here. It's managed to pull enough light out of nowhere, seemingly, to pull me out of the image without blowing out the background too much. But it did cut off the top of my hair, which my friend Adam will be very glad about. So it's not perfect, but I'm still going to give it 4 points here for being the best of a bad bunch, potentially. It is close next, but I would say the Pixel 8 Pro then does a good job, even though there are some obvious, reflections going on here. 3 points to the Pixel 8 Pro. Then I'm going to draw both the iPhone and the Xiaomi 13T Pro here. Like, Xiaomi handles exposure better, but has the worst light reflections of the 4. But the iPhone, whilst the quality is there, is far too dark. So 2 points to each of these phones here. Now, this next shot is also just really interesting to see how each camera handles the drop-off of background blur that you'd normally see on the professional photos. I think the iPhone and Xiaomi does the best job at like a more natural fall off, whereas everything on the Pixel is blurry, and the S23 Ultra had that just miss on the left-hand side here. So that is food for thought if you want to take that into consideration. Now, this next one is a polarizing one. I actually asked a few other friends about what they thought about these 4 shots. The Xiaomi came out on top for being the brightest image and the most color accurate. The S23 Ultra then had the best separation in terms of portrait mode. Pixel didn't do a bad job either, but again, the hair gets lost in the darkness. The iPhone, well, it's kind of unfair here, as unfortunately this one wasn't shot on portrait portrait mode on the iPhone, but I still wanted to use this shot as it's really interesting to see how each phone handles these things differently. I think it will come down to personal preferences with this shot, much like the rest of this video, to be fair. Now, I'm impressed with what the Xiaomi's done here, but if I was to pick just one to upload to Instagram or something like that, it would probably be the S23 Ultra here. So let's go with the S23 Ultra and the Xiaomi 13T as joint first place, so 4 points. Then the Pixel 8 Pro, 3 points, and the iPhone 15 Pro Max at just 2 points. Next up, this one was a front-facing portrait shot. Very interesting results. The iPhone just, wow, total, complete focus miss. It just really feels like I'm really, really blurry, but it is slightly better than the Xiaomi, which is the only photo which doesn't mirror it by default, though you can change that in the settings. Then we have the Pixel. It did a reasonable job, though again, it missed the top part of my hair off. Seems to be a common recurring theme, that. And the S23 Ultra in all its spotty, hairy glory is in the first place for the front-facing cameras. Now let's take a look at some zoom shots now. So here is the 5x zoom on all of the cameras. The iPhone takes the win here for evenly exposing the image, though it does of course have a 5x optical lens, so that's kind of to its advantage. The Pixel 8 Pro, also with a 5x lens, does come a very close second. I think it did blow out the clock face a bit, so it just didn't seem to look as good as the iPhone. Then the S23 Ultra for being a little bit too noisy, which, to be fair to the Ultra, does have a 10x lens, so this is actually digitally zooming in from the 3x lens. We'll get to that in a moment. And the Xiaomi is just losing a lot of detail from zooming in from its 2x lens here. But speaking of 10x lens, zooming in now to 10x, which only the S23 Ultra here of these 4 phones has a native optical 10x zoom lens. The results are really interesting. Now we have 3 photos here which are surprisingly similar, given that the S23 Ultra has a dedicated 10x optical lens, and yet the flag is sharper on the iPhone. It did have a bit of noise in the image, but I think the Pixel actually has the better image here. Like, the face on the statue at the bottom is the most visible of the 3 shots here, and the top looks like, or rather looks less like a watercolor painting. So I'm actually going to go with the Pixel to win the 10x zoom over the S23 Ultra, which in this situation, software does beat hardware. Crazy. iPhone comes second. S23 Ultra comes third, even though again has a 10x lens, and the Xiaomi failing rather ungracefully into last place. But let's just push it a bit further. Let's go up to 25x zoom right now, which is the maximum the iPhone can do within the software, which at night and in this low light is really the maximum you can go before just things get into total potato quality. The obvious miss here, of course, as you'll be able to see, is the Xiaomi 13T Pro. And this was just, honestly, I really struggled to keep the phone steady enough at that zoom level to focus and take the photo. I actually thought I did get it, but obviously not. Whereas the other phones, as you start zooming in, you get this kind of lock-on effect that holds the image in place for you. So 1 point to the Xiaomi. But I have to say, of all the 3 remaining shots, I know they've made their own decisions in terms of what to expose for, but the S23 Ultra here at least does look the best in my opinion. It exposed the clock face beautifully. So 4 points to the S23 Ultra. And then I'm gonna go with the Pixel next for exposing the clock face evenly. And then the iPhone as the clock face. Why did I add this word into my scripts too often? And then the time looks blown out. So 2 points to the iPhone, and then of course 1 to the Xiaomi. But what happened in this next test is one that genuinely surprised me. Now, I wanted to test the consistency of zooming between the lenses in video mode, and the best way to test that is to zoom in on some rich colors to check for 2 things: checking for shifts in the lenses as they switch between which lens they're using, and also any change in color as that switch happens. Now, the iPhone had the smoothest zoom, without a doubt, but it also has this tendency to hold on to, I guess it was the 2x lens, because you can see the switch to 2x, and then digitally zoom instead of actually switching to the 5x lens. Now you can clearly see here that it gets really, really pixelated, and then after a bit of fudging by zooming in and out a few times, it then does switch to the zoom lens and the image instantly sharpens up. The S23 Ultra, other than the fast brightness change between switching lenses, colors are actually genuinely quite good here, and there's no major shift in lenses, so not bad for the S23 Ultra. The Pixel 8 Pro though, this one seems to jump between the lenses, even though the colors aren't bad. But the 13T Pro, actually, you do see this smallest jerk when the lenses change, and it's like someone switched on a flashlight, where it, kind of dimly brightens the image up rather than an instant kind of bright change like we do see on the S23 Ultra. So other than that, it's fairly smooth. So I'm going to go with the iPhone for 4 points, even though it has those digital zoom issues here. That's not what we're testing here right now. We're testing for smoothness and color changes. Since how often do you film yourself zooming into the floor at night? Not very often. The S23 Ultra, 3 points, 13T Pro, 2 points, and the Pixel at 1 point here for having that quite dramatic shift in changing between camera lenses. It honestly looks like you suddenly change perspective on the thing you're zooming in on. So it seems that the iPhone technically wins here if, very broad strokes here, but that isn't the full story, of course. Technically, the Pixel 8 Pro wins if you care more about photos than some of the video shots. But even then, if you take a lot of portraits, the Pixel misses the edge detection quite a lot. So perhaps the 23 Ultra or maybe even the 13T Pro would be better. So let me know down in the comments which one wins for you, because this again is very personal. And then go and watch this video next. Until next time, thank you, bye-bye.